Madam President.
The senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise today to discuss a bipartisan bill that would ensure all Americans can access 911 in emergencies. In December of 2013, Kari Hunt was attacked in her Texas hotel room. As this was unfolding, her 9-year-old daughter tried desperately to call 911, but the call did not go through. Like millions of American children, Kari's brave daughter was taught to dial 911 for emergency assistance. But because they were in a hotel room, the phone required her to dial 9, followed by 911. In any emergency, a few precious seconds can mean the difference between life and death. And although we cannot prevent tragic events from taking place, we do have the ability to make it easier to get help. And that's why I've teamed up with Senators Amy Klobuchar, John Cornyn, Ted Cruz, and Brian Schatz to put forward a new bill that could save countless lives. Our legislation, named in honor of Kari Hunt, would require that everyone has the ability to call 911 in an emergency. This problem isn't isolated to one hotel room or a particular incident. As of March 2014, consumers could not directly dial 911 in 44.5% of hotel franchises and 32% of independent hotels. Over the past 2 years, the hotel industry and phone manufacturers have undertaken voluntary efforts to improve the problem, and I do commend those efforts. But we need to do more. If one person cannot call 911 in a life or death situation, that is one person too many. The bill that we've introduced, known as Kari's Law, would require multi-line telephone systems, such as those used in hotels and schools and office buildings, to have a default setting that enables people to directly call 911 without first dialing an access code, such as 9 or 1. The bill also requires that these phone systems be programmed to allow a central location, such as the hotel front desk, to be notified if a 911 call is made. Through our legislation, first responders can more easily locate people during an emergency, and then they face fewer barriers while this is unfolding. Kari's Law has already received generous support from across the country. For example, in Nebraska, the bill is supported by the Firefighters Associations in Omaha and Lincoln, the Buffalo County Sheriff's Office, the City of Beatrice Fire and Rescue, Cheyenne and Scottsbluff County 911 representatives, and the chairman of the Scottsbluff County Board of Commissioners. The bill is also supported by the hotel industry's American Hotel and Lodging Association. And I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of FCC Commissioner Pai, who has devoted time and resources to bring attention to this very important issue. Commissioner Pai traveled to Nebraska last June, and he participated in a workshop on direct dial 911 issues while at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. He's continued to encourage the industry to work with him in an effort to find solutions to this important issue. The Nebraska Public Service Commission, which led the workshop, has also been at the forefront of the discussion. And finally, we would not be here discussing this bill without the tireless work of Kari's father, Hank. Hank has worked day in and day out to advocate for this legislation at both the state and the national level. Hank has made it his mission to ensure that no other family will have to suffer through a similar tragedy. To paraphrase Hank, it was the look on my granddaughter's face when we failed her, A 9-year-old did what she's instructed to do by her parents, teachers, and adults. She was in a true dire emergency and followed instructions, but it didn't work. I would call on all my colleagues to support this important legislation. We owe it to Kari Hunt, her family, and the Americans who rely on their ability to call 911 for emergency help. Mr. President, I also want to take a moment to speak about another bipartisan bill that is currently before the Senate. And this legislation also seeks to protect Americans by updating our telecommunications laws. It would fix loopholes in our laws that are allowing scammers to take advantage of innocent Americans through a practice known as caller ID spoofing. Caller ID spoofing allows predators to deliberately falsify their identification and telephone numbers relayed through caller ID. The scammers frequently ask for personal information and for money. Often senior citizens and our veterans are the target of these predatory practices. Caller ID spoofing has become a major problem for Nebraskans and for law enforcement, which is why I am committed to eliminating this practice. In September of 2013, USA Today highlighted the story of Marion Kerr from Hastings, Nebraska. Ms. Kerr is an 83-year-old retired hospital nursing administrator who fell victim to a spoofing scam. She received a call from individuals who claimed to work for the federal government, and they asked for her bank account information. The scammers told her they were federal officials and already had her name, address, and their phone number. And they used this information to trick Marion into providing her bank account number. Ms. Kerr had caller ID, but it displayed a number in Nevada, not Washington, D.C., or Hastings, Nebraska. She attempted to call back repeatedly, but she either received a busy signal or was sent to voicemail. Ms. Kerr reported the incident to the police, but by then it was too late. Her money was gone, and there was nothing that law enforcement could do. Last fall, the Omaha FBI issued a warning about the danger posed by scammers using the Bureau's identification to target Nebraskans. The callers claimed to be offering a grant from the federal government, and they proceeded to solicit credit card and banking information. This practice is happening across the country, and it needs to stop. Whether it's hardworking Nebraskans like Ms. Kerr or veterans who bravely served our country, no one is immune to this form of fraud. And that's why I am very pleased to join with Senator Nelson last month to introduce the bipartisan Spoofing Prevention Act. This bill would amend the Truth in Caller ID Act. Currently, loopholes in this law are allowing scammers to manipulate caller ID information and to harass millions of Americans. While the Truth in Caller ID Act has helped to curb spoofing, the growth in new technologies has allowed scammers, especially those operating overseas, to continue this fraudulent practice. The Spoofing Prevention Act would crack down on spoofing by prohibiting caller ID spoofing on all voice calls, including those originating outside the United States, and all calls made using IP-enabled voice services. It would also prohibit caller ID spoofing done via text messaging, which is now becoming a really common practice. Additionally, the bill directs the GAO to look at what the FCC and the FTC have done to combat spoofing. We must call for new solutions as technology continues to evolve. And I urge all my colleagues to support this important legislation so we can ensure that our citizens are protected from fraud and abuse. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Indiana.
Mr. President, I'd like to